Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suzuki. Coming up, results are in for Nauru's election. Also,
if that tropical cyclone isn't moving very much, let's say it's moving slowly, it can produce very heavy rain for an extended period of time.
5 to 9 tropical cyclones are expected in the region, and
so it's a really vital part of our community, making sure that we have a skilled workforce and a productive workforce.
A new initiative giving Pacific workers a chance to upskill. Over the weekend, Nauru's citizens went to the polls for the country's general election. I was joined by TVNZ's Pacific correspondent Barbara Drever at the RNZ studio in Auckland to talk about the results. Talofa lava, Barbara, thank you so much for coming into RNZ.
Talofa lava yourself.
Let's run through the key results for listeners in Nauru. David Ariang has been re-elected in his constituency, though he's not automatically president.
No.
Laino Angimea, who's the incumbent foreign minister, has also been re-elected. What does that tell you about what voters think the country's leaders are doing?
Okay, so I've just crunched some numbers and it looks like the status quo has been re-elected. So all of David Ariang's cabinet, that's all 12 of his, the executive government has been re-elected, all of them. So that's 8 cabinet ministers, including himself, plus 4 who are like deputy or ministerial assistants, etc. So he'll be sitting pretty, thinking, okay, well, the public wants us back. There was 3 MPs that I was surprised to see not elected, that they had been there for at least 2 terms. So we've got at least 3 new MPs who are coming into Parliament. But I think when you look at who has been elected, as you've just said, it's pretty clear that the public has gone for the status quo.
You know, speaking of the status quo, it looks like people have also, in the referendum, have voted against extending the parliamentary term.
Yeah.
What can we glean from that?
Well, it also shows that they're putting their ministers and their government on notice, because they're saying, because of course the government wants a 4-year term because they can get more done, but also they're in power for a year longer. Why wouldn't you? So the fact that the publics have gone, no, we want a 3-year, because it's only 44% who have voted to change it to 4 years. And remember, that government had voted in government, in Parliament, to change it, but it had to get the public's approval, and they have to get 2/3, I believe, to get it passed. So only 44% voted in favour. And don't forget, Nauru has a compulsory voting system, so you have to vote. So around 8,500 people voted, just a bit less than that. And the fact that it was such a strong result, saying no, does show that the public want their leaders to perform in that shorter time, and that's fair enough.
Okay, so now the public have spoken. What are some of the big issues that you think this government will need to prioritise or address in the next 100 days? Okay,
so I think it all comes down to who is going to be the new president, right? And you might think David Ariang, he's sitting pretty, like it's all his group around him. But what I would say is when he was elected as president, it wasn't so clear, right? It was a 9-9 vote between him and also another MP, Renier, and I'm probably saying this wrong, Gabada, and the 2 of them were tied. And they had to take it to the vote 3 times before David Ariang got elected as president. And he was the 4th president in 4 years. Now, that was a pretty volatile sort of time, and there were some big issues going on before that as well. And so the fact that it took him 3 lots of voting to get in as president, but he has retained it. And it was he only got to be president because Russ Kun there was a vote of no confidence against him. And so from the last election, so he only was president for a year before he was, taken out as president. So it'll be really interesting. Like, Nauru is an interesting place, and I have learnt a long time ago not to try and predict what's going to happen. Actually, I can say that about most of the Pacific, to be fair. When we know who it is, then we'll get a better idea of what's going to happen. Right. But your question, what should be prioritised?
Well, one of the big issues that came in the past year, we've seen Nauru sign $1 billion deal with Australia to resettle 300 non-citizens. What have your contacts told you about that deal? Is that a concern?
Well, don't forget, Nauru is really just continuing what they've always done for quite some years, and they're going to get 400 million for the first year and then 70 million, this is Australian, for every year after that. What I know is controversial about this deal is that there's been very little transparency over it. So that is the bare basics that we know, but we don't know how much is going to be put into mental health for the refugees or asylum seekers. And what we do know is that the UN earlier this year ruled that Australia is responsible. They can farm people off to wherever they like, but they're still responsible for their health and well-being, their human rights. And this is the problem with Nauru, right? This is the problem, is that there's no critical analysis, thinking, questioning, and what I would say too is that this is why it hinges on who gets to be the new president. David Adiang is very controversial. He goes for things that he doesn't take the easy option. He takes a controversial option, like, for example, they're selling passports again. There's quite a lot of guardrails around it so they don't sell it to criminals. But there's this issue too. And don't forget, David Adiang was Baron Wonga's right-hand man. He was accused by Australia as being involved. He's denied it. But both him and Baron Wonga were accused of taking kickbacks from a phosphate company, and that's been investigated by the Australian police. He sacked a whole lot of judges. He changed the judicial system while he was Justice Minister, and he was also part of this government that has really cracked down on media. So people like you and I can't go there to do this critical thinking or to do this, like, see what the mood on the ground is, talk to people, because it's going to cost us $8,000 Australian each to apply for a visa, and you could get denied.
Very interesting. Definitely something we'll be keeping an eye on, especially as the wheeling and dealing for positions take place among MPs. Thank you, Barbara. That was Barbara Drever, TVNZ Pacific correspondent on the Nauru general election, which took place on Saturday. Meteorologists are predicting 5 to 9 tropical cyclones for the Pacific region in the coming season, which runs from November to April. The forecast from Earth Sciences New Zealand show the western part of the region around Vanuatu and New Caledonia is at higher risk. I spoke with principal scientist Chris Brandolino and began by asking him about the severity of cyclones being forecast.
Well, the expectation is that, first of all, tropical cyclones, just to kind of set the scene, we use a category system to help understand the intensity. It goes 1 to 5. 1 is the weakest, 5 is the strongest, but keep in mind a category 1 can still cause some really bad impacts in terms of flooding. Our expectation is that for this tropical cyclone season, which begins in November, concludes at the end of April, anywhere from 2 to maybe 4 severe tropical cyclones. So that's a category 3 or higher. So that's a severe tropical cyclone if it reaches category 3. So we're thinking anywhere between 2 and 4 may occur anywhere across the basin, which extends pretty far, which is pretty big. It goes from the Pitcairn Islands all the way over toward Papua New Guinea. So the Southwest Pacific is a pretty large basin, but anywhere from 2 to 4 severe tropical cyclones.
Why is the risk of impact from tropical cyclones higher in the west than the rest of the region?
Great question. So oftentimes, look, tropical cyclones thrive off certain conditions. From an ocean perspective, tropical cyclones really like warm ocean waters. Generally speaking, around 26, 27 degrees, that's sort of the magical threshold to sustain a tropical cyclone. It's, tropical cyclones are vast heat engines, so they need those warm ocean waters. When we have the conditions that we have now, which is La Nina, so La Nina is a climate driver. It's a naturally occurring climate driver that occurs in the equatorial or the tropical Pacific Ocean. When we have La Nina, what that tends to do is it tends to favor warmer than usual waters in the western side of the basin. So over toward Papua New Guinea, over toward Vanuatu, over New Caledonia, the Solomons, basically near and west of the dateline. And when you get near and east of the dateline, ocean temperatures during La Nina tend to be cooler than usual. So because of that sort of gradient, warmer a bit farther west, cooler to the east, using the dateline as a reference, that tends to load the numbers areas farther west versus farther east, if that makes sense.
Earlier on, you pointed out that even tropical or Category 1 cyclones, they still have significant impacts in terms of flooding. But besides the obvious damaged buildings and infrastructure, what other impacts do severe cyclones have on small island nations?
Yeah, look, I'll even say even not severe. Look, it's wind, it's waves, and it's water. So that water could be from heavy rainfall. That water could be from storm or tidal surge. So basically, think of when we have large wind or high wind that often accompanies tropical cyclones. That wind can, because of the low barometric pressure and the wind, that can create what's called a storm tide or storm surge, where basically you have the sea level elevated because of the piling of water due to the strong wind, as well as the low air pressure helping to kind of raise the sea level. So there are a couple different ways where water can go where it's not meant to be. That could be due to very heavy rainfall causing flooding, or that could be from the sea basically moving onshore due to the strong wind or due to that storm surge I talked about. So, and you got to remember, a tropical cyclone is an area. It's not a point. So oftentimes people may hear in the media or from their national meteorological provider, maybe a Latin along that understands or that articulates rather where the center of the storm is. That's just where the center of the storm is. But again, it's not a point. The tropical cyclones are an area. So significant impacts can be felt oftentimes well away from the core of the tropical cyclone, depending on the size and depending on other sort of circumstances. So it's really important that people in the tropics take these, take tropical cyclones seriously, which I think most people do. But it doesn't take a severe tropical cyclone to cause severe damage. If a tropical cyclone, let's say it's a Category 1 or a Category 2, something that's on the lower end of the scale, if that tropical cyclone isn't moving very much, let's say it's moving slowly, it can produce very heavy rain for an extended period of time, which could really cause things like flash flooding, slips, and create some really devastating impacts from a low-end tropical cyclone. So it's really important that you not get too fixated on the category, if it's severe, if it's a Category 4, Category 5 versus, say, a Category 1.
Thank you, Chris, for your time. Just before I wrap up, what happens next now that this outlook has been released?
So now we watch and monitor. So the first half of tropical cyclone season goes from November to the end of April, right? And history tells us that it's the second half of the tropical cyclone season that is typically the busiest. It doesn't mean we can't get a tropical cyclone or two in November or December. Of course that can happen. But when you look at history and use history as a guide, it's February, it's March, even into early April. That tends to favor the increased activity because oceans are at their warmest and overall the conditions for tropical cyclones are more favorable, historically speaking, in the second half of summer and into early autumn. So my best advice, stay on top of the forecast. Listen to your national Met agency, whether you're in Fiji or New Caledonia or the Cooks or Samoa or anywhere in the Pacific and the tropics. Here in New Zealand, obviously Met Service, we worked with Met Service to produce this tropical cyclone outlook. And here in New Zealand, we have a normal to elevated risk for at least one ex-tropical cyclone impacting us during the tropical cyclone season. So look, forewarned is forearmed. So stay on top of the forecast and know basically what's coming if you're going to be out at sea or if you're going to be in the tropics or doing anything as we work our way through the tropical cyclone season.
In New Zealand, a new employment initiative is targeting Pacific people in rural areas who need work. Project Whetū is a government pilot project involving 10 students wanting to upskill and train for jobs in agriculture. Tiana Haxton reports.
Government research shows that unemployment figures for Pacific people in New Zealand are significant, with unemployment rates at 10% and underutilisation rates at 18%. This is much higher than the national averages of 5% and 12% respectively. The CEO of Hanga Arorau, Phil Alexander Crawford, says Project Whetū will help change the statistics.
We're fortunate that we have a growing Pacific people in New Zealand, and over half of the population is under 30 years old. So it's a really vital part of our community, making sure that we have a skilled workforce and a productive workforce. So it's critical that we address any issues or barriers that exist.
Mr. Alexander Crawford says the training pilot is aimed at breaking down the barriers to make formal training more accessible in rural towns. For many participants, this will be their first formal qualification.
It's a micro-credential, so it's a NZQA recognised digital skills for manufacturing. So it's about providing training that isn't necessarily already available out in the regions. We know that it's challenging to provide vocational education throughout New Zealand, so this is one of the solutions to regional training.
He says the skills are also transferable, opening the door to alternative employment pathways. As some primary industry employers downsize, workers are left with fewer opportunities, and Pacific families are amongst the hardest hit.
Even in the situation where employers aren't able to continually employ anyone that undertakes this training, those skills will set them up for other types of employment in other industries as well. So it supports them in their existing jobs, but is also providing transferable skills.
He says staff are not the only ones reaping benefits. Offering this training has great value for employers too.
It encourages them to step up into higher paying positions, more responsibility, which in turn for employers means greater productivity, and it helps retain those staff. So it's a win-all for everyone. And of course, with greater productivity in the workplace, that's significant for the national economy.
The 10 students currently in the pilot training project are expected to graduate in November this year. If successful, Alexander Crawford says this could serve as a model for nationwide workforce development, especially in rural regions struggling with employment instability.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā sui fua.